Ethan Ward had the world at his feet, yet his heart was starving. Every morning he woke up surrounded by marble walls, glass windows, and silence that felt heavier than loneliness itself. Cameras followed him at every charity event. Investors worshipped his every move, and magazines crowned him New York's golden bachelor. But when the flashlights faded, he faced an emptiness money couldn't fill. Then came Vanessa Cruz. The internet called them the perfect couple. She was a goddess of Instagram, beautiful, glamorous, always posing beside expensive gifts and tagging luxury brands. To everyone else, she was his dream come true. To Ethan, she was beginning to feel like his biggest mistake. She didn't love his laugh, his quiet nights, or his scars. She loved the lifestyle. Every dinner turned into a photo shoot, every private moment into content. When she kissed him, he could almost hear the click of her phone camera. Ethan smiled for the world. But inside, something was breaking. He had everything men desired: wealth, fame, power. But as he watched Vanessa's reflection smiling only for the cameras, Ethan realized he could buy the world, yet not a single heartbeat of genuine love. The night that shattered Ethan Ward's illusion began like any other: a lavish dinner, champagne bubbles rising under chandelier light, and Vanessa laughing with her two best friends in the living room. Ethan had returned home early, hoping to surprise her with flowers. Instead, what he heard from the hallway froze him in place. "I've already secured my future," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with pride. "Even if Ethan loses everything, I'll still walk away with half." The room erupted in laughter. His fingers tightened around the bouquet until the stems snapped. Her words didn't strike him like lightning. They cut slowly, like a knife twisting inside his chest. For a moment, he hoped it was a joke, one of those cruel, like careless things people said for attention. But as the laughter continued, Ethan felt something inside him break quietly, like glass cracking under pressure. That night, when Vanessa kissed him goodnight, he forced a smile and said nothing. Her perfume lingered, sweet and poisonous. Sleep never came. At dawn, Ethan called his oldest friend, Marcus Hayes. They met at a quiet cafe on Fifth Avenue. Ethan told him everything, his voice low and tired. Marcus listened without interruption, then sighed. "My cousin went through the same thing," Marcus said, stirring his coffee. "He lost his business, thought his fiancée would stand by him. She left within a week. People love you until the money's gone." Ethan looked out the window. The city outside buzzed with life, horns and footsteps echoing against glass towers. He had spent his whole life building this empire, only to realize he might be the loneliest man alive. Memories came flooding back. The college girlfriend who vanished when his scholarship was revoked. The woman who left when his first company nearly collapsed. Each heartbreak had left a scar, and now those scars began to ache again. By noon, Ethan was back in his office, but he couldn't focus. Vanessa's words looped in his head, replaying like a curse. "Even if he loses everything, I'll still walk away with half." That evening, he drove to his mother's estate on the outskirts of the city. Mrs. D. Ward greeted him with her usual calm smile. She was a graceful woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. Over tea, Ethan told her everything. The conversation, his doubts, his pain. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she set her cup down gently. "Ethan," she said softly, "real love does not fear empty pockets. It fears empty hearts. If your heart doubts hers, test her, but promise me something." He looked up. "What's that, Mom?" "Promise me you will be strong enough to accept the truth, whatever it is." Ethan's chest tightened. He nodded slowly. "I promise." That night, alone in his penthouse, he stood before the mirror. The man staring back was powerful, admired, untouchable. Yet his reflection looked hollow, fragile. He picked up his phone and called his legal advisor. I need a press statement prepared, he said. Make it believable, a complete financial collapse. No one outside this circle must know the truth. The advisor hesitated. Are you sure, sir? This will shake everything you've built. Ethan exhaled. That's the point. When he hung up, the city lights flickered below him like distant stars. For the first time, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. If Vanessa truly loved him, she would stay. If she didn't, the truth would reveal itself soon enough. He poured himself a drink, looked out at the glittering skyline, and whispered, Let's see who loves the man, not the money. Somewhere in the dark reflection of the glass, his own eyes stared back, haunted, determined, ready for a test that would change everything. The next morning, the world woke up to headlines that rippled through every business channel. Ethan Ward loses millions in failed international deal. Stock values plummeted, investors panicked. By noon, the Ward empire, once synonymous with perfection, was in freefall. Inside his penthouse, Ethan stood by the window, watching the city blur beneath the rain. He had planned every detail, a fake press release, carefully staged leaks, and even an internal memo hinting at bankruptcy. Everything had to look authentic. When Vanessa arrived that evening, her face was pale but perfectly made up. She threw her arms around him. Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry, she whispered dramatically. It's all over the news. But listen, money doesn't matter. I'm with you, no matter what happens. Her words were soft, but her eyes flicked toward the muted TV screen, where a news anchor was reciting his downfall. Ethan watched her carefully. Her performance was flawless. If he hadn't known better, he might have believed her. Thank you, he said quietly, his tone measured. It means a lot. Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile meant for the camera rather than for comfort. She poured herself a glass of wine, crossed her legs, and started scrolling through her phone. Notifications were already flooding in. Friends, journalists, followers. The sympathy posts were coming fast. She turned slightly toward him. Babe, maybe you should release a statement. Something about resilience and starting over. People love that. Ethan nodded, pretending to take her advice seriously. You're right. I'll think about it. But later that night, when he stepped out to answer a call, Vanessa picked up her phone too. She hesitated, biting her lip, before scrolling through her contacts and stopping on one named Derek. Hey, she said softly when he answered. It's been a while. Can we meet maybe tomorrow? I could use someone to talk to. Her voice melted into a tone Ethan hadn't heard in months. Warm, flirty, real. What she didn't know was that Ethan had already assigned one of his trusted men to keep an eye on her. The driver she thought was hired by her cousin worked for him. By the next evening, the photos arrived on Ethan's phone. There she was, Vanessa Cruz, perfect makeup, black dress, laughing across a small cafe table. Opposite her sat Derek, handsome, confident, the kind of man who thrived on someone else's heartbreak. They weren't talking about business. They weren't talking about sympathy. They were leaning close, smiling, touching hands. Ethan stared at the photos in silence. No anger, no shouting, just a deep, cold stillness that sank into his bones. Every lie, every promise, every "I'm with you no matter what" now looked like theater. He deleted the message thread, closed his phone, and walked into the quiet living room. On the wall hung the engagement photo, two smiling faces framed in gold. He took it down, looked at it one last time, then placed it face down in a drawer. That night, New York's skyline glittered like diamonds outside his window, but all Ethan saw was the truth. Vanessa's love was never for him. It was for the world he could offer her. And as he poured a glass of whiskey, he whispered to himself, if money built this love, then losing it will show me what's real. Somewhere in his reflection, a quiet resolve began to form. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a test that would expose everything, every mask, every motive, every heart. The plan was dangerous, elaborate, and utterly convincing. Ethan Ward needed the world to believe that his story had reached its tragic end. At dawn, on a quiet stretch of road just outside the city, a wrecked black sedan lay half-crushed against a guardrail. Flames flickered, smoke curled into the air, and a single headline soon spread like wildfire. Billionaire Ethan Ward in critical condition after car accident. Within hours, news stations replayed footage of flashing lights and paramedics rushing a stretcher toward an ambulance. The man beneath the oxygen mask looked lifeless. By evening, the report shifted again. Sources confirm Ethan Ward has suffered severe spinal injury. Doctors fear he may never walk again. In reality, the entire scene had been orchestrated. Every paramedic, every officer, even the attending physician had been briefed. Only Ethan's mother and 2 trusted aides knew the truth. When Vanessa saw the news, she burst into dramatic tears. Her phone camera was ready before her emotions were. She knelt beside his empty hospital bed, snapping a photo with her hands clasped in prayer. The caption followed minutes later. God, please heal him. Go faith strong, true love. Her followers flooded the comment section with sympathy. Stay strong, Queen. You two will get through this. True love always wins. The likes rolled in by the thousands. Behind the performance, Vanessa stayed silent. She visited Ethan once, barely 10 minutes. She didn't ask when he would wake, didn't ask about his recovery, didn't even touch his hand. Her eyes were restless, darting from the hospital monitors to her phone. Before leaving, she whispered to the nurse, "Call me if anything changes," and walked out without looking back. 2 days later, Ethan's official spokesperson announced that he had been moved to a private rehabilitation center. Then, quietly, Ethan disappeared. No photos, no updates, no contact. At first, Vanessa pretended to worry. She posted a few more quotes about faith in hard times, but as the days stretched on, her posts grew lighter again. Brunch photos returned. Luxury shopping bags reappeared. By the end of the week, the sadness had vanished from her feed entirely. When friends asked about Ethan, she sighed with feigned sorrow. He's in a bad place emotionally. He needs space. But the sparkle in her eyes told another story. Relief, freedom. That night, she sat by her vanity, scrolling through messages from Derek. "Dinner tomorrow?" he'd written. Vanessa smiled. Of course. In her mind, the show was over. The tragedy had played its final act. The curtain had fallen. Ethan Ward, the billionaire who had once given her the world, was gone, at least as far as she knew. But miles away, in a dimly lit room, Ethan watched everything unfold on a laptop screen, his expression unreadable. The real test had just begun. A week later, on a bright afternoon, the city moved as if nothing had happened, but in front of a busy supermarket in Manhattan, life was about to stage a scene no one would forget. A man sat near the entrance in a rusty wheelchair. His clothes were torn, his hair unkempt, his face half hidden under dirt and exhaustion. In his lap rested a small plastic bag, and inside it, a single fake flower. People passed by without a glance. Some threw him a few coins, most didn't even look. Vanessa Cruz stepped out of a black car, sunglasses gleaming, her perfume slicing through the air like her confidence. She had just finished a meeting with a fashion brand desperate to rebuild her image after the scandal. With her new designer purse and a photographer following discreetly behind, she looked every bit the woman who had moved on. Then she heard a weak voice. "Vanessa." Her body stiffened. Slowly, she turned. The beggar was looking up at her, His eyes, tired, familiar, met hers. "I know I have nothing," he whispered, "but I still love you. Will you marry me?" The fake flower trembled in his hand. Vanessa's lips parted, then curled into disgust. "What did you just say?" Her voice rose sharply, drawing the attention of nearby shoppers. "You think you can approach me like this? Look at you. You're pathetic." The man's voice shook. "You promised you'd stay, no matter what." People began to whisper. A few lifted their phones, recording. Vanessa's anger flared. She slapped the flower out of his hand, then struck his face hard enough for the sound to echo. "Don't you dare talk to me. You ruined my life, and now you show up like this? You disgust me." He lowered his head to silent. She took a step back, sneering. "You don't belong here. You never did." And then, amid the murmurs, a clear, gentle voice broke through. "Stop it." The crowd turned. A young woman in a supermarket uniform was hurrying forward, her brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "Who do you think you are?" she demanded, standing between Vanessa and the man in the wheelchair. "He's still a person. You don't get to humiliate him like that," Vanessa scoffed. "And who are you? His charity worker?" "No," the woman replied, her tone firm. "Just someone who still has a heart." The beggar looked up at her, and for the first time in months, saw kindness not mixed with pity. Vanessa rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath, then turned sharply and walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, her laughter cold as glass. The young woman knelt beside the man. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded weakly. "My name's Grace," she said. "Come with me. You can't stay out here." And as she pushed the old wheelchair down the narrow street, Ethan Ward, hidden behind dirt and disguise, looked up at the fading sunlight and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The apartment was small, barely larger than Ethan's old walk-in closet, yet it felt warmer than any mansion he had ever lived in. The faded walls carried the scent of home-cooked stew, and the air was filled with the soft humming of Grace as she moved about the room. Her mother, a gentle woman with tired eyes and a frail body, sat on a wooden chair near the window, smiling faintly at their guest. "Here," Grace said softly, placing a bowl of rice and beans in front of Ethan. "It's not much, but it's warm." He hesitated, his voice low. "You shouldn't waste your food on me." Grace smiled. "We don't waste kindness." He looked down at the steaming bowl, realizing he couldn't remember the last time someone had fed him without wanting something in return. Each bite carried more than flavor. It carried humanity. That night, Grace handed him a clean shirt from an old drawer. "It was my father's," she said simply. "He was a good man. You remind me of him somehow." Ethan took the shirt carefully, running his fingers along the worn fabric. It was faded, soft, and smelled faintly of soap. To anyone else, it was nothing. To him, it felt like dignity returned. He watched as Grace helped her mother to bed, adjusting the thin blanket and whispering something that made the old woman chuckle. Then she turned off the single light bulb, leaving only the glow of the street lamp outside. The sound of rain began to tap gently against the cracked window. Ethan lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. His mind drifted through memories of gala dinners, penthouse parties, and boardroom applause. None of it compared to this quiet room filled with the laughter of two women who had nothing, yet gave everything. Over the next few days, Grace continued to care for him with the same gentle consistency. She would wake early, sweep the small floor, make tea, and check on him before heading to work at the supermarket. Her mother would keep him company, telling stories of her younger days and reminding him that life, even when hard, was still beautiful. Ethan offered to help, but Grace only shook her head. "Just focus on getting better," she said. "You'll stand again one day. I know it." He smiled faintly. If only she knew. Every evening when Grace came home, she brought small stories from the outside world, funny customers, silly coworkers, little things that made her laugh. Ethan found himself waiting for those stories, waiting for her voice. For the first time in years, he wasn't surrounded by luxury, fame, or lies. He was surrounded by something real. As Grace handed him a cup of warm tea one quiet night, Ethan looked at her and realized that peace had a sound. It was her voice. It was her kindness. It was the heartbeat of a home that money could never buy. The days began to fall into a quiet rhythm. Each morning, the faint sound of Grace's humming drifted through the small apartment as she prepared for work. The tune was never quite the same, but it always carried the same feeling hope. Ethan would watch her from the chair by the window, pretending to still be weak. She moved quickly, tying her hair back, folding her apron, slipping on her worn shoes. Before leaving, she always paused to pour tea for her mother and place a small plate of bread beside Ethan. "Breakfast," she said, smiling. "Don't let it get cold." After she left, the room felt emptier, yet somehow peaceful. Her presence lingered like the scent of morning sunlight. In the afternoons, Grace returned carrying leftover sandwiches from the supermarket. She handed them to children who played barefoot in the alley. "Here," she told them, "share with each other." The children's laughter filled the narrow street, and Ethan, watching from the window, felt something deep inside him stir something he had forgotten existed. That evening, Grace sat beside him, sewing a torn sleeve on her mother's dress. "It's strange," she said softly, "how life can take everything from you, but still give you chances to be kind." Ethan listened, his chest tightening. He thought of his world before contracts. Power, fake smiles. People had always taken from him, but here was a woman who kept giving even when she had nothing. The next morning, he saw her helping an old man carry his groceries up the stairs, laughing despite the wait. Later, she stopped to feed a stray dog by the market. Every act, no matter how small, seemed to restore something broken in the world. That night, over a simple dinner, she noticed Ethan watching her. "What is it?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "You're different," he said quietly. Grace tilted her head. "Different how?" "You see beauty in places most people overlook," he replied. "Even when life is unfair, you still smile." She chuckled softly. "Smiling doesn't mean life is easy. It just means I choose not to let pain define me." He looked at her, his heart heavy and light all at once. Then she added, "What we lose doesn't define who we are. What we do after losing it, that's what matters." Her words echoed in his mind long after she went to bed. He sat there in the dim light, realizing he had met people who were rich in everything except soul. But Grace, she was rich in every way that mattered. For the first time, Ethan understood what it meant to admire someone not for what they had, but for who they were. And as the night deepened, he felt something growing quietly inside him, a warmth, a pull, a beginning, the kind of love that asks for nothing in return. One evening, Ethan sat in the dim glow of the small kitchen, watching Grace repair a tear in her mother's blanket. The rhythm of her hands was calm, patient, almost prayerful. He had seen wealth build empires, but never had he seen kindness build something this beautiful. That night, after Grace went to bed, he picked up his phone and made a single call to his mother. When Mrs. Dukormov, which Williams heard his voice, her silence lasted for a few seconds too long. "So," she said softly, "you finally found what I've been praying for?" Ethan told her everything, how Grace had taken him in, how she treated him not as a burden but as a human being. His voice trembled when he spoke of her laughter, her generosity, and the way she found joy even in poverty. The next morning, Mrs. Ward decided to see the truth for herself. At noon, Grace was working at the supermarket, restocking shelves when an elegant older woman approached. She wore a simple hat, her gray hair neatly tied back. "Excuse me, dear," the woman said kindly. "I'm so sorry, but I seem to have forgotten my wallet at home. I just needed this milk and bread for my grandchildren. Could I come back later to pay?" Without hesitation, Grace smiled. "That's all right, ma'am. I'll cover it. Just promise me you'll eat with your family tonight." The woman blinked, surprised. "You don't even know me?" Grace shook her head. "That doesn't matter. You looked like you needed help. That's enough." When the woman insisted on leaving her name, Grace simply said, "No need. I'm sure someone has helped me before. It's nice to return the favor." Later that night, Mrs. Lino Ward sat in her car outside the supermarket, tears glistening in her eyes. The world her son lived in was filled with people who loved his money, yet here was a girl who offered kindness freely, without knowing she was speaking to the mother of a billionaire. Within days, quiet miracles began to happen in Grace's life. A letter arrived from the pharmacy, stating that her mother's medical bills had been unexpectedly cleared. A local grocer began sending boxes of food and supplies, insisting it was part of a community support initiative. Grace didn't question it. She only smiled and whispered a thank you to whoever was listening. Then came the biggest surprise, a letter from the university. She unfolded it slowly, her hands trembling. Full scholarship? It read, tuition, materials, and living expenses, everything covered. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the paper to her chest. Her mother's voice shook when she said, "Grace, how is this possible?" Grace smiled through the tears. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe a guardian angel is watching over us." Across town, Ethan read the same email from his assistant confirming the scholarship had been processed. He leaned back, eyes soft with pride. For the first time, he felt not like a billionaire, but like a man witnessing grace itself take form. It was a golden afternoon, the kind that made the city hum softly with life. The supermarket buzzed with its usual rhythm, people coming and going, carts clattering, children laughing. But near the entrance, a small crowd had begun to form around a man in a wheelchair holding a single red rose. Ethan sat quietly, dressed in the same tattered clothes Grace had first seen him in. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what he was about to do. When Grace stepped out of the store, she froze. The sight of him waiting there made her heart skip. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled gently. "Grace," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've shown me that love still exists. You taught me what it means to care without expecting anything in return. Because of you, I believe again. Grace Miller, will you marry me?" The crowd gasped. Shoppers stopped pushing their carts. A few people lifted their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Grace's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes glistened as tears welled up. "Ethan, I—" She couldn't finish. Instead, she dropped to her knees, took his hands, and nodded through the tears. "Yes, yes, I will." Applause erupted around them. The moment shimmered with the purest kind of joy. But then, as she leaned forward to embrace him, something unbelievable happened. Ethan began to stand, slowly, firmly. He rose from the wheelchair, steadying himself on his own 2 feet. The crowd gasped again, this time louder, disbelieving. Gasps turned into shouts. "He can walk." "Is that really?" And then someone cried out, "Why, that's Ethan Ward, the billionaire." Cameras flashed. Whispers turned into a storm of awe and confusion. Grace stumbled back, her eyes wide. "Ethan, what's happening?" He reached for her hand, his voice breaking slightly. "I didn't lose my ability to walk, Grace. I lost my ability to trust. But you," he looked into her tearful eyes, "you gave that back to me." The air hung still for a moment before applause broke out again. Louder than before, Grace threw her arms around him as laughter and cheers filled the street. For Ethan, the disguise had fallen away, but the truth had finally come to light. In a world obsessed with appearances, he had found someone who saw past them. As cameras clicked and strangers wiped away tears, Ethan whispered into her ear, "You didn't fall in love with the billionaire. You fell in love with the man who had nothing, and that's how I know it's real." Grace held him tighter, her tears of joy glistening in the sunlight, unaware that this moment would soon make headlines across the country. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the Ward estate for the first time in months. The iron gates opened slowly, and a car rolled in, carrying Ethan and Grace. She sat quietly beside him, still dazed from the whirlwind of the past few days. Every moment replayed in her mind the confession, the proposal, the revelation, yet, deep inside, she still wondered if she truly belonged in his world. When the car stopped, the front doors opened, and Mrs. Ward stepped out. Her eyes glistened with emotion as she looked at the young woman standing next to her son. Grace hesitated, unsure whether to bow, to speak, or to run. But before she could decide, Mrs. Ward crossed the steps and wrapped her arms around her. "Welcome home, Grace," she said softly. "You've done something no one else could. You healed my son's heart." Grace froze for a second, then slowly returned the embrace. It was warm, real, and full of something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. Inside the grand foyer, portraits of generations past lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow her every step. It was a world so far from her tiny apartment that she felt almost like a visitor in a dream. But when she looked at Ethan, his hand reaching for hers, the fear faded. Mrs. Ward led her into a room filled with soft morning light. On a velvet cushion sat a small golden necklace, delicately carved with a symbol of intertwined hearts. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," Grace whispered, awed by the beauty of it. Mrs. Ward smiled. "It belonged to every woman in this family who carried kindness as her greatest jewel. Now, it belongs to you." She clasped the necklace around Grace's neck. The weight was light, yet it carried meaning heavier than gold. Grace blinked back tears. "I don't deserve this. Kindness always deserves to be honored." Mrs. Ward replied gently, "You gave my son back his faith. That is more valuable than anything money can buy." From the doorway, Ethan watched silently, his heart swelling with quiet pride. He had once thought happiness lived in penthouses and headlines. Now, he realized it was right here, in a simple gesture between two women who saw love not as a luxury, but as grace. Within hours, the world found out. Headlines spread like wildfire: "The Billionaire and the Supermarket Girl," a love story that defied fortune. Social media exploded with admiration and disbelief. Some called it a fairy tale, others a miracle. But for Ethan and Grace, the noise of the world faded into something softer. That evening, they sat together in the garden, the city lights flickering in the distance. Grace leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "So this is what home feels like." Ethan smiled. "Yes," he said quietly. "And this time, it's real."